already learned about how to raise capital, and we also learned about the cost of capital. So the next topic is the capital structure. And by the term capital structure, what I mean is the debt equity ratio. So whether you want to have more debt or whether you want to have more equity in your company. So in other words, we are talking about the leverage. The leverage is the effect of having debt. So by having leverage, you can have more assets, which means you can generate more returns. So it may be more profitable to have more debt. But at the same time, leveraging may create another side effect, which is the bankruptcy. So by having more leverage, in other words, by having more debt, it means you need to pay back certain money at the end. So therefore, if you cannot pay back, then your company will be in trouble, and suddenly it may involve some legal fighting, or maybe your company will be liquidated. In other words, your company will be shut down. So this is very important to make a balance between more debt and less debt, and that will be our major topic in this chapter. So in this chapter, I'm going to introduce two major streams of the theory. So we have, on one hand, we have a static theory of capital structure, and on the other hand, we have a pecking order theory that we are going to discuss maybe in the next week. But in the static theory, the principle is coming from the work by Modigliani and Miller. So these Modigliani and Miller, these are two well-known economists, and both of them won the Nobel Prize in economics. So they are so well-known for their work. So first, Franco Modigliani won the Nobel Prize in 1985, and Modigliani was actually a teacher of the Miller. So Miller was a PhD student of the Modigliani, so they have had a co-work, and Miller later won another Nobel Prize in economics in 1990. But Miller is also famous for his another work, which is about the option pricing model. So if you are interested in investments, especially in the derivatives, there is a well-known equation named Black-Scholes equation, and the other name for the Black-Scholes equation is Black-Scholes-Miller equation. So he also contributed to the development of the derivatives pricing. And they had published two research articles. In 1985, two professors published the article entitled "The Cost of Capital, Corporation Finance, and the Theory of the Investment." And as the name implies, this is about the cost of capital, but the major implication is the determination of the capital structure. So this is the first classical theory about the capital structure. But after they published their work, there was a lot of criticism because their theory suggests something which is totally different from what we observe in reality. So many economists thought that these results are unrealistic, and they criticized. And later, they accepted some of the criticism, and they had revised their work to be more realistic And the second work is titled as Corporate Income Taxes and the Corporate Capital, a correction. So this is a correction about their first research paper. And also what you can find is that now they are going to talk about corporate taxes. So following their flows of their logics, so we are first going to learn about their first findings, and then we are going to adjust what we have earned to the second one by applying the corporate taxes. So in their first work, they propose very famous argument that a firm's value is independent of the firm's capital structure. So here we have VL and we have VU, and VL is the symbol for the company's value when there is leverage. In other words, when there are many debt. But on the other hand, we have VU, which is a unlevered value of the firm. So this is the value of the firm when the firm does not have debt, any of the debt. And as the equation implies, there is no difference between these two. So in other words, it does not matter whether you have debt or not. So this is why the result is known as irrelevance, because the company's value is irrelevant from their choice about the capital structure. So the conclusion is striking because they suggest that there is no optimal capital structure. In other words, you don't have to spend a lot of efforts to find out how to constitute your company's capital structure. You can have 100% equity, or you can have 50%, 50%, or you can have 60 versus 40. It does not matter at all. So you don't have to care about it. Then this is the figure that symbolizes the irrelevance theory proposition. So there is a company, the same company, and this one is the value of the company when the stocks, the equity takes 40% and the debt takes 60%. And the next circle symbolizes the value of the company when the stocks, the equity takes 60%, then the bonds, the liabilities, the debt takes 40%. And they have the same region. So the size of the circle, these two circles are the same. So the capital structure from their point of view is just a matter of how to divide the same size pie into two pieces. You can have stocks or you can have bonds, but it does not matter at all because the pies are the same. And to understand how it can be shown, this is a very, very simplified version of their study. So let me use this example. So here is a imaginary company, Bold Corporated, and the market value of the company is $100 million, and it has long-term debt of 80 million. So currently, the company's debt ratio is 80 over 100, so it is 80%. So it is highly levered one. And then the interest rate for the debt is 10%, and the number of shares outstanding is 4 million. And the earnings before interest and taxes is given as $40 million. And let's assume that the net income will be distributed to the shareholders. In other words, the dividend ratio is 100%. And this is a critical assumption. There is no corporate tax. And if we think about the current income statement, the income statement at this moment, the EBIT, the earnings before interest and taxes, is 40 million, and they pay 10% interest, and because their debt existing is 80, they have to pay interest expenses 8 million annually, and therefore the taxable income will be 32. However, there is no corporate tax, so it will become the net income. So the net income is $32 million, and because among the $100 million assets, 80 is debt, therefore 20 is equity. So 32 over 20 is the return on equity, and it is 1.6, which is 160%. And the earnings per share, this is the net income divided by the number of shares, and the number of shares was 4, so therefore EPS should be 8. And because they distribute all the net income into the dividends, in other words, their dividend ratio is 100%, so therefore, the dividend per share is same as the earnings per share, which is $8 per share. And then the company recently hired a new CEO, Ms. Safety, and she thought that this company has too much debt. So as I said, the debt ratio was 80%, which is significantly high. So she wanted to make sure that her company is safe. So she proposed the following change. So now the company will issue common stock shares which worth of $80 million, and then using the proceed, the company will pay the existing long-term debt. So the debt will be gone. And finally, there will be only an equity financed company, 100%. And then the current stock price is, this is the value of the company, and this is the debt. So 20 is the value of equity. And because the number of shares is 4, the stock price is 5. And therefore, if we want to raise $80 million, then the number of shares to be issued is 16. And therefore, after the issue, the number of shares will become 4 plus 16, so it will become 20. So the number of shares would increase, because now they are replacing the existing debt with the new shares. And then the income statement will change. So after the proposal, after the change, now the EBIT does not change. It is the same, so it is 40. However, there is no interest expense anymore, because the company already paid back all the existing debt, so there is no liability at all. So therefore, no interest expense. So the taxable income will be again 40, and because there is no tax, the net income will be 40. So it seems that there is a benefit, because now we don't pay interest. So our net income seemingly increased from 32 to 40. And however, now if we calculate some of the performance measures, the ROE, ROE actually has become lowered because before the change, the equity was only 20, but now it is 100. So 40 over 100 gives you 40% ROE. And at the same time, earnings per share also becomes lowered because the number of shares before the change was 4. However, now it is 20 million. So earnings per share is 2. So as a result, from the shareholders' point of view, it seems that the dividends has decreased. It was 8 before the change, but now after the change, the dividends is only $2 per share. So let's think about the shareholders' point of view. By converting from the levered company into the unlevered firm, now shareholders seem to take disadvantages. Their performance measures became lowered, and actually they get lower amount of dividends. And let's think about a representative shareholder, Mr. Angry. So he has the 1 share of the board corporation, and his dividend income was 8. Now he only get $2. So it seems that he is suffering something from the change. But now we are going to show that he can actively manage this situation. So now he will visit his bank and he will borrow $20 at the 10% interest rate, which is the same interest rate as the company did. And using $20, because the stock price is $5 per share, he can purchase 4 shares. And then he would have now 5 shares in total. So let's compare the situations before and after. So the before the change, he only had 1 share. However, from the single share, he get $8 dividends. So he get $8 as his return. But after the change, now he has 4 additional shares. So he has in total 5 shares. But he gets $2 per share dividend. So as a result, he gets $10 as the return from his stock investment. But for this, he had to borrow from the bank $20, and he would pay the interest to the bank. So he should pay $2, and the remainder is $8, which is essentially the same as before. So from his point of view, nothing has changed. He can maintain $8 return before and after the change in the capital structure. So this was possible because he can manage his own leverage by visiting bank and borrowing from there, and he can purchase additional shares. So he can make a kind of homemade leverage, and then as a result, he can maintain the same level of the dividends, whatever the company's capital structure is. So therefore, from the shareholders' point of view, the value of the company did not change at all. So the value of the company is the same if the company has more leverage or not. So there is nothing to care about if you are a shareholder of the board corporation. So this episode symbolizes, this one gives you a kind of the idea what the irrelevance proposition is. So according to this irrelevance proposition, you don't have to care about the capital structure because the managing a company has one single ultimate goal, which is maximizing shareholders' return. So you need to work from the point of view of the shareholders, and from the shareholders' point of view, shareholders' wealth or shareholders' return is not affected by the capital structure. Therefore, as managers, you also don't have to care about the capital structure. But as I said, this suggestion, this is a proposition or hypothesis because this is a theoretical finding which is different from the realistic evidence. So after the Modigliani-Miller's first publication, a lot of criticism has been done, and one of the major criticisms was about the strong assumption. So in this assumption, in this finding, they have made a strong argument that if there is no corporate tax, this is possible. However, in reality, companies need to pay taxes to their governments, and it will create some differences. So therefore, from now on, we are going to look at the second arguments of the Modigliani-Miller. But if we apply the corporate taxes, what happened to the companies? So after accepting the criticism and revising their work, they proposed the second paper, which is about the capital structure when there is corporate taxes. And actually, they found that the company's value will increase when the company has more leverage. And the reason is related to the taxes. So here, VL is the leveraged company's value, and VU is the company's value when there is no debt. And compared to VU, VL is larger, and the reason is T. And T is corporate tax ratio. So when you have corporate taxes, the company's value will increase as the company has more debt. So therefore, if this is true, our conclusion for this chapter is that the ultimate capital structure should be using leverage as much as possible. So in other words, you need to minimize the usage of the equity and you have to increase the debt. So the target debt ratio should be very close to 100%. And let me show you why such an argument can be possible. So let me go back to the situation of the bold company. And now we have taxes. And let's say the tax rate is 40%. And let's see what happens to the company. So the others are the same. So the EBIT is 40 and interest expenses 8. Therefore, taxable income 32. And then taxes should be calculated based on the taxable income, and it is 40%. So this is 12.8. And therefore, net income should be $19.2 million. However, if we replace the existing debt, then the interest expenses will be 0. So therefore, the taxable income is 40, and the taxes is 40 times 40%, which is 16. So therefore, the net income will be 24. So we can find some observations here. Although the net income itself increases, and due to the reduced interest expenses, actually there is another disadvantage. The side effect is that the taxes increase. So taxes before the change was 12.8 and now it is 16. So the taxes are the payments to the government, and actually from the point of view of the corporations, they hate it because the cash flows are going to the third party, which is not directly related to the corporation. So taxes are evil. So from the point of view of the companies, they are losing a lot of money and they are wasting it. So this is a concern, and we will see that it is actually true. And by the way, the reason that the taxes are affected is because in the calculation of taxes, whenever you calculate your taxation, the flow, the order is always you start from the EBIT and then you deduct interest expenses and then you care about the taxes. So by having interest expenses here, we can actually make it smaller, our taxable income. So it will help us to lower the taxes that we have to pay. So this is the magic of interest, and we call it as tax shield effect. So by having interest, in other words, by having debt, we can actually minimize the tax expenses. So it helps us to decrease the tax sizes. So this is a side benefit of the of the existing debt. And let's think about the point of view of the shareholder, Mr. Angry. So he was able to make $8 return, whatever the company's capital structure is, when we didn't have corporate taxes. However, in this new situation, now there is difference. So if he tries the same thing, so he borrows $20 and he tries to buy 4 additional shares, still his returns are different when when the company had debt and when the company now does not have debt. So before the change, he can have $4.8 dividends, and after the change, now the return is only $4, so the dividend return has been lowered. So you can see that because of the taxes, now the shareholders cannot utilize the homemade leverage. He cannot be the same before and after the change. So therefore, what we see is Mr. Angry, the shareholders' return, has been decreased when the bold company eliminated the existing debt. So therefore, removing debt is harming the shareholders. If we reverse this finding, we can argue that increasing debt will help the shareholders. The main reason is that in their tax calculation, the interest and the existing debt has a benefit. It helps us to minimize the payments in taxes. So this is a summary of the comparison between the two different scenarios. So on the x-axis, we have debt, and the y-axis is about the value of the company. And when we had no corporate taxes, the value of the company is always the same, regardless of the debt. However, when we have corporate taxes, the value of the company increases when we increase the debt. So the change comes from the taxes. And therefore, we can argue that because of the interest tax shield effect, having more debt is beneficial to shareholders, and because our main objective is to maximize the shareholders' return, we should increase our debt. So that's the finding of the Modigliani's second research article. And now let's think about the real world and let's compare it with the findings of the Modigliani-Miller. So the Modigliani-Miller's two research articles help us understand about the capital structure in reality. So they suggest there is a benefit of the debt, which is the company's value increases because of the tax shield effect. However, their findings are somewhat unrealistic still, even after the correction, because they propose that the optimal capital structure is 90.99999%, the debt ratio. However, in reality, the most of the companies' debt ratio stays between the region about 50% to 60%. So they have 50% debt and the another 50% equity usually, but they do not take the extreme level of the debt. So there should be certain reasons why the companies in real world do not follow the Modigliani-Miller's suggestion. So we are going to search the reason behind this. So for the international students, it really helped you to understand about the Korean history if we are going to study about this. So Korea is one of the emerging countries around the world that was able to become one of the top economies worldwide, and it is it has suffered a dramatic changes. So it was occupied by Japanese Empire in 1930-40, and at the time a lot of people in Korea was suffering from having nothing, and now we were able to industrialize our economy and we were able to increase our size of the economy. And through this process of the industrialization, there were a lot of conglomerates or the business groups in Korea. And at this moment, if you are going to point out one of the most successful companies in Korea, maybe you would have heard about Samsung, maybe LG or SK. However, in the early 1990s, the situation was slightly different. At the time, Samsung or SK or LG, they were not the top companies in Korea actually. And at that time, we had another two companies, Hyundai and Daewoo. And Hyundai and Daewoo, these conglomerates were so successful, and Daewoo especially, and they had ruled the Korean economy. But in 1997, we had Asian financial crisis, which occurred not only in Korea but also in Thailand, Taiwan, Japan, and Hong Kong, and other Asian nations also. And in this economic disaster, many companies suffered bankruptcy. So Daewoo was one of the companies that was liquidated at that moment. So before the crisis, the Daewoo strategy, their slogan was global management, and they were so aggressive in their management. So they were really interested in expanding their market, not only in domestic Korea, but also in other Asia nations. So to achieve their goals, they relied on a lot of borrowed funds from banks and other financial institutions. So at that time, the Daewoo's average debt ratio was actually the debt to equity ratio was about 300%, which means they had more debt compared to their equity capital. So when the situation was friendly for them, it was helping the company because relying on the leverage effect, they were able to be more profitable and they were able to be more successful compared to other Korean companies. But when there was a crisis, this became this struck back, and now the name of the Daewoo is gone in Korean economy. So we should understand that relying on too much on the debt has a side effect, which is that borrowing is essentially, it involves the paying the money in the future. So maybe you would be bankrupted if you have not enough money to pay the existing debt in the future. So the bankruptcy is a legal process that in this situation, a corporation cannot pay the existing debt or the liabilities. Therefore, the company gave up paying the money back, and now the ownership and the rights of the companies will be transferred from the shareholders to the liability holders. So after the creditors get the claim, they choose between two options. First, they may choose to liquidate the company, and second, they may choose to reorganize the company. So the liquidation, this is their first choice. Liquidation means now the company will stop the operation and they will dismantle, and they are going to sell all assets, and the remaining cash, these will be distributed to the creditors. But on the other hand, if the creditors think that the company still has some value, then they will give one more chance to survive. So they are going to help. They are going to allow some reliefs. But at the time, the company should go through a harsh reorganization. So therefore, they have to cut some of the employees, they have to lay offs, and they have to reduce the cost so that there can be some proof about their survival in the future. So it is really hard to say this, but the most prominent example of the bankruptcy situation is actually happening in this university. So the Myongji Foundation has suffering the bankruptcy issue. So there was some creditors arguing that they didn't get the money promised from the Myongji. So they went to the court and claimed about the bankruptcy of the Myongji. And as a result, we had to make some commitments to the court that we are going to have certain reorganizations to have more profits in the future. So that's why nowadays, this university is trying to change the name of some of the departments, and they are changing some of the colleges, and they are maybe trying to cut some employees maybe in the future, but I'm not sure about it. But anyway, the creditor have chosen reorganization in the case of Myongji because the school has some values for the students, but maybe if this is only about a private company, then the creditors may have chosen the liquidation because they don't see such things from a private companies. So the bankruptcy is not rare cases. It happens in reality, and therefore the managers of the company should care about the potential, the possibilities of the bankruptcy every day. And this may be the reason why company managers do not try to have 99% of the debt ratio. So there are certain costs related to the bankruptcy or the financial distress. It involves some direct costs, such as if you are going to argue something in the court, you may need to hire lawyers, you may need to get some advices from them, and you may need to spend some time writing the documents for your defense. So these are the legal fees that are going to affect your performance in the future. And at the same time, there are also indirect costs. For example, investors, if they believe that this company is already in trouble, then investors may not want to help you because they don't see that in the future they can get the money back. So this will cause another serious problem. So raising capital becomes more difficult. And at the same time, customers may not want to purchase the products or the services provided by the company. For example, if you want to get a car and you think about using this car for 10 years, and then suddenly the car manufacturer is in trouble, so there is a possibility that it will go bankruptcy in 2 years. Then your natural choice is not to purchase this car from this company. You will look at other choices because after the bankruptcy, you cannot get the services. For example, you cannot get the recalls, you cannot visit their service depot. So therefore, this will be very difficult to manage your car after that. So therefore, from the beginning, maybe your customers may leave you. So, and this is also same for the suppliers. They do not want to rely on you. So they may seek other managing partners for their businesses. So these indirect costs are significant, and it makes the situation even worse if you are already in a difficult position. So there is a synergy or negative feedback that if you are in trouble and this becomes even difficult to overcome this financial distress. So therefore, managers should care about their possibility, about the potential financial distress. And by the way, if the company is in trouble, the employees will seek out their alternatives. So they are going to leave the company and the headquarters, the head hunters may come to them and they are going to get a job in other companies, maybe some of the competitors. So it will cause another problem. So these are the disadvantages of having more debt. And therefore, now we have two matching forces. So on one hand, we have benefits, and on the other hand, we have cost. On one hand, we have advantages, and on the other hand, we have disadvantages. On one hand, we have interest tax shield effect as the benefit, and on the other hand, we have a financial distress cost. So this is the core idea in the static theory of the capital structure. So the static, what it means, this is not a simple stopped situation. So when you think about the static, you should think about something like this. So this is this term is originated from the science, physics. So let's say I'm going to put this erase on the top of the desk here. It is static. It does not move. However, it is not moving, not because there is no forces. There are forces affecting the position of this eraser. On one hand, we have gravity pulling down this eraser, and on the other hand, we have the supporting forces from the desk. So that's the result of the equilibrium. So there is a one force and the other force is counter matching it. So that's why this is staying on this desk. So similarly, what the static theory of the capital structure implies is that it is currently at this situation because there are two driving forces. On one hand, we have the benefits from the tax shield effect, and on the other hand, we have disadvantages coming from the financial distress cost, and therefore, in balancing between these two forces, the managers decide the optimal capital structure. So now we have the third line. So this was a graph that represents the situation when there is no corporate taxes and there is no financial distress cost. If that is true, then regardless of the debt, your company's value is the same. However, when we adopt the corporate taxes, actually when the debt increases, the value of the company also increases. And this originates from the tax shield effect. And now the third graph shows that there is also disadvantage. If we move from here to here, we have more debt, so therefore we are going to have more financial distress cost. So it will pull down the value of the company down to here. So therefore, the actual company's value may start to decrease when there is a significantly high financial distress cost. So we can see that there exists an optimal choice. So before this point, it is better to increase the debt. After this point, it is better to decrease the debt. So we conclude that this is our ultimate goal or our target, which is at this moment. So it is the point where we can maximize the shareholders' wealth and the company's value. So we should choose this capital structure. So this is the implications from the static theory of the capital structure. The optimal capital structure exists, and this is the result of the balance between two forces, tax shield effect and the financial distress cost. So if we revisit the 2 pi figure, now we can compare what we get in two different situations. So when there are less debt, we have smaller bondholders' claim, but at the time, we should pay more taxes. However, if we increase our leverage, the bondholder claims increase, but at the same time, the tax claim, the money going to the government decreases. But you should also care about the bankruptcy situation. So when there is no debt, the bankruptcy possibility is lower. So you have financial distress costs much smaller. However, if you have more debt, you have more cost related to the financial distress. So therefore, as a manager, you should carefully think about compare between these two and choose some of the betweens. Okay, so far we talked about the static theory of the capital structure, and when we think about the static theory of the capital structure, our point is that there exists certain optimal choice, and because there is an optimal choice, we should find it out. So that's the argument about the capital structure from the classical point of view. So when I say classical, this means this is old. However, it is not old-fashioned. This is old, however, still it gives some implications. It gives some ideas about how to explain the real world. So the static theory help us to understand and explain about the real world company's capital structure, and that's why Modigliani and Miller won the Nobel Prize in Economics thanks to their contributions.